Good afternoon. How you guys doing today? Doing well? Excited to be here in Waukesha County the day before the presidential primary debate? Good. Well, we're also glad you're here. 2 days from now, we celebrate Veterans Day. And what we need to do is to give a warm round of applause for the individuals that have served our great country for so many years and sacrificed so much for all of us. Thank you, veterans, for everything that you've done. And with that, if you would, let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good afternoon. My name is David Karst, and I am a grassroots conservative Republican that has been the chairman of the Milwaukee County Republican Party for over 8 years. So I welcome you. I see so many familiar faces, and I see a number of different new faces. And what I'm energized the most is today, and I believe tomorrow, is the only grassroots event here in the Milwaukee, Waukesha area. So I applaud Senator Rubio for being that grassroots conservative Republican that will lead this great nation. It is my honor to introduce to you our state senator that represents Milwaukee and Waukesha County, Senator Leah Vukmir, who is also the co-chair of the Marco Rubio for President campaign.
Good afternoon, Waukesha County. How are you? Hello, Wisconsin. What a great, great crowd. Oh my gosh. Are you ready to meet the next resident of our home at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue? I am so humbled and honored to stand before you today to introduce an amazing man who has taken the stage by storm, and he is going to continue through Election Day to become the next president of the United States of Wisconsin, United States of America. Do we love Wisconsin or what? You know, I first learned about Marco Rubio in 2010. That was when he was running for the U.S. Senate and I was running for the state Senate. You know, it was just a small election year for us here in Wisconsin, right? Let me see. We elected Governor Walker, took control of the executive wing, and took both the Senate and the Assembly. It was a monumental year. And that year was the year that Senator Marco Rubio took on Charlie Crist. Remember that? No one thought he could do it. And he won. And he's going to continue to win. And we are so grateful to have him here today. You know what? The story that really endears me to Senator Rubio is the story that shows his passion for the American dream. He's lived the American dream as the son of Cuban immigrants. And it's the story that resonated with me as the daughter of Greek immigrants. But we all are people who want to experience the American dream. And that is what is so wonderful about Marco Rubio. He is so passionate about restoring the American dream for every single one of us in this country. We've lost that. The last 8 years with the president, we've lost our way. We need to restore that dream. We need someone with a bold vision for America, someone who's willing to take on the tough issues, to tackle immigration reform, tax reform, higher education reform, protecting that safety net for our seniors. That person is Marco Rubio. And He needs your help here in Wisconsin and with all of your friends and family across the country. We need him to be the next president of the United States because he is that next generation conservative for a new American generation, a new American century. Please welcome Senator Marco Rubio, the next president of the United States of America.
It's not that she doesn't want to be here. It's that she might have to. It's that she might have to step out in a second to take a call. Our kids are in the middle of the school day, and so we're coordinating all the logistics. So we want to make sure if she gets that call, she can. But it's great to have Jeanette with me. Thank you, Senator, for your introduction. It's such an honor to be with all of you here. It's great to be here in Wisconsin. It's a little warmer than Florida. I'm honored to be with you guys. I really am. It's a fantastic opportunity to speak to you about the future of America. It's the reason why I'm running for president. And I thought I'd spend a few moments telling you about why I'm running for president, because I think that's the most important answer that someone needs to give you when they seek this office. And I begin by saying that I think this is, as you do, the single greatest nation in the history of the world. And I believe that not because I read about it in a book, but because I saw it in my life. My parents were born on the island of Cuba. They were born into a society like most people are born into, where your future is determined for you by the circumstances of their birth. That means if your parents were rich and famous people, you had a chance to succeed. If your parents were not rich and famous people, you were stuck. That is the human condition for almost all of history everywhere in the world. The reason why they came here in 1956 to America is because it was the one place on earth where that wasn't true. It was the one history of the world where your future is determined by your hard work, your talent, and your perseverance. It was the one place on earth where people like them could have a chance to get ahead. My parents were never rich or famous people. You never would have heard about them had I not run for office. They never made a lot of money. But my parents were successful because working as a bartender and a maid, they were able to buy a home in a safe and stable neighborhood. They were able to retire with dignity. They were able to raise a family, and they were able to leave all four of their children better off than themselves. This story has a name. It's called the American Dream. It is a dream that people have all over the world, but it's called the American Dream because it's happened so often here, and it's been so rare everywhere else. And so it should trouble us that a growing number of Americans now doubt whether that dream is still alive, and if it is, whether it will still be around for their children to inherit. They feel this way because they feel like they're being left behind in their own country. They are working as hard as they ever have, but their paychecks are not enough to keep pace with the cost of living. Their children went to college, they got a degree, they even borrowed money to pay for it. Now they owe thousands of dollars in student loans and they can't find a job. You own a small business and you're struggling to stay open because government's making it harder on you. Or you're someone out there who is struggling to get ahead in this small business and being overwhelmed by the regulations that are placed on you or the complicated tax code that's burdening you. Then you open up the newspapers, and every day brings news that America, the greatest, most powerful nation on the planet, is now being routinely humiliated by Vladimir Putin, by the Chinese, by the Ayatollah of Iran, by radical jihadists. And then back home, people that hold traditional values are increasingly stigmatized as haters or bigots or worse. And the result is the sense that the country is not just changing, but falling behind. And that the American dream that makes us special is eroding, and that no one in politics seems to get it. It doesn't seem to matter who we elect. Have a majority in the Senate of Republicans, elect a majority in the House. No matter who we elect, it seems like nothing changes, that Washington's out of touch, that the issues that impact our daily lives are not being met with a sense of urgency. And the result is a deep level of frustration and anxiety, not just about today, but about the future. About the idea that our children and grandchildren will not be able to inherit the kind of country that our parents and grandparents left for us. And that's why this election is so important. This election is not just a choice between Republicans and Democrats. This election is not just a choice between liberals and conservatives. This election is a generational choice, a choice about what kind of country we are going to be in this new century. If we stay on the road that we are on right now, the road that both parties have put us on, then I hate to say this to you, but if we stay on this road, if we have another 4 years like the last 8, we are going to be the first Americans ever that leave our children worse off than ourselves. The good news is we don't have to stay on this road. The good news is that there's another choice before us, and it is a choice that if we embrace it, it will allow us to leave our children and our grandchildren as the freest and most prosperous Americans that have ever lived, and our nation greater than it's ever been. That choice is before us too, but we must act now. We still have time to get this right, but we do not have forever. And in this election, we are not just choosing the next president, but we are choosing the direction and identity of this country in the 21st century. And if we are willing to do what needs to be done, we can usher in the greatest era in the history of this extraordinary country. But here's what it's going to take. Number one, it's going to take leaders that understand how different this economy is from the one you and I grew up in. It's just not the same economy anymore. It's a global economy. We now have to compete with dozens of other countries. It's an economy where today's cutting-edge industry is outdated in 5 years. You think about how fast things are changing? It took the telephone 75 years to reach 100 million users. The telephone. It took Candy Crush 1 year to reach 100 million users. So the world is changing. We need leaders that understand how much the world has changed, that apply our principles of limited government and free enterprise. We don't have to change those principles. We should re-embrace those principles. But we need to apply them to the challenges of a new economy and a new era. And today we're not. We are stuck with outdated leaders with outdated ideas, with a retirement system designed in the 1930s, with energy policies from the 1970s, with higher education system and anti-poverty programs from the 60s, with a tax code from the 80s. The world is changing, and we and our leaders are stuck in the past, especially on the political left. They have no new ideas. The political left has no new ideas. Their answer to any problem, you ask them a question about anything, and their answer is, well, I'm going to raise a tax on someone, and I'm going to use it to fund more government to fix it. The time has come to turn the page and embrace ideas that allow us to compete economically. That's why we need to reform our tax code. We can't be globally competitive with the most expensive and complicated business tax rate on the planet. That's why we need regulatory reform. You can't survive in small business, or any business for that matter, being overwhelmed by billions of dollars of new regulatory costs every single week. That's why we need to balance our budget. You can't grow your economy if you have a debt crisis. That's why we need to fully utilize our energy resources. It is reckless and irresponsible not to fully utilize the oil and the natural gas that God has blessed this country with. And that's why we need to repeal and replace Obamacare, because we cannot grow this economy when we have that anchor around our neck. If we can do these things, I can tell you this with full confidence. The American private sector is going to create millions of the best paying jobs this nation's ever had. That's important to say that. I'll tell you why. We have a lot of leaders, sometimes in both parties, that like to tell you how many jobs they created when they were president, when they were governor, when they were senator, when they were mayor. And I guess I understand kind of what they're trying to say. But the truth is, presidents, governors, senators, congressmen, and mayors don't create jobs. The private sector does. The job of people in politics is to pass and put in place policies that make America the easiest and the best place in the world for the private sector to succeed. And if we do that, the American private sector, made up of the most world and the most productive workers on the planet, the American private sector is going to create not just millions of jobs, but millions of better paying jobs. But those better paying jobs are going to require more skills than ever, which is why the second thing we have to do is we have to modernize what we mean when we say higher education. For starters, I do not understand for the life of me why we became a society that told young Americans that trade schools and vocational training were for kids that weren't smart enough to go to college. That just isn't true. A welder makes a lot more than a philosopher. I want to be the vocational education president. Not just someone that celebrates these jobs and helps the private sector create them, but someone that actually makes it easier for people to go into those fields. Someone that says, let's open up Pell Grant. And instead of waiting until they're 18 years of age, if a 16-year-old wants to be an auto mechanic or an airplane mechanic or a welder or a machinist, let them go to high school in the morning and use the Pell Grant to go to school in the afternoon so that when they're 18 and they graduate, they have a job making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. That doesn't mean we're not going to have four-year schools. Of course we are. We need college football, so we're going to have 4 years. That's only partly a joke, by the way. That's only a partial joke. But we have to reform that too. First of all, they need more competition. You understand these colleges and universities in America are basically controlled by 5 or 6 accrediting boards who are not elected and not accountable. They decide who can teach and who can't. And we live in an era where information is as easy to acquire as ever before. And 25 years ago, if you wanted to learn about something, you'd have to go to a library and check out a book, or you'd have to go to a bookstore and buy a book. Today, if you want to learn about something, it takes you 15 seconds on one of the search engines. How come that sort of learning has not been moved into the 21st century for people that need it? Because what matters is not how many hours you sat in a classroom. What matters is what you've learned. So we should have an alternative to traditional four-year schools that gives you credit for what you've already learned. If you served 5 years in the military and you were deployed to the Middle East, I think you deserve some credits in Middle Eastern affairs. If you've been working as a receptionist at a law firm for 15 years and are trying to become a paralegal, you should get some credit. I'm sure you've learned something in that years of work experience. And then allow people to package whatever they're missing through a variety of sources, including free online coursework that allows people to acquire the skills they need for a better paying job. And for those who seek the traditional four-year degree, that will still be an option. But here's to know. You deserve to know how much people make when they graduate from that school with that degree before you borrow money to pay for it. Before you borrow $50,000, you deserve to know that the market for philosophers has tightened over the last 2,000 years. And if we do these two things, if we can make America the easiest and best place in the world to create jobs, and we can give our people the skills they need for those better paying jobs, we are not just going to have an economic recovery. We are going to have an economic renaissance. We are going to have an economic renaissance greater than anything this nation's ever seen. But there's one more thing we have to do, and it's actually the most important. If we don't do this third thing, none of these other things are going to matter. We need a federal government that keeps us safe. It is the reason why we have a federal government. We need a president that reminds people, that understands that the federal government was never designed to be a big government. It was designed to be a limited one. The Constitution enumerates those powers, and it says, if it's not on this list, you don't have this power. But far too long, we've had leaders in both parties that have rejected that or have ignored that. None like the president we have now, but people that have rejected it and ignored it and have expanded the federal government to get involved in things it has no business being involved in. For example, there is no reason for the federal government to be involved in K-12 education through Common Core. But the one thing the federal government must do is it must keep us safe. And today it is failing. Look at the world today. You have a lunatic in North Korea with 24 nuclear warheads and a long-range missile that can probably already reach the state of California. The good news is they're not very good at aiming. The bad news is they're going to hit something. The Chinese are undertaking the most rapid military expansion in history, and they're using it to take over the South China Sea, to hack into our computers, to practice shooting down our satellites. A gangster in Moscow is sowing instability in Europe and now in the Middle East. A radical Shia cleric, the Ayatollah of Iran, is about to receive, because of President Obama's deal with him, $150 billion in sanctions relief. And he's not going to use the $150 billion to build bridges, roads, and hospitals. They're going to use it to sponsor terrorists that kill Jews and kill Americans. They're going to use it to build a long-range missile of their own that can reach the United States, and eventually they will use it to either buy or build a nuclear warhead. And as if all that wasn't enough, we now have multiple radical jihadist groups, enslaving women, selling them into marriages, crucifying Christians. And they've spread through dozens of countries and multiple continents, and they even recruit Americans to join them online. This is a dangerous world. And as the world grows more dangerous, Barack Obama has weakened our military. We are on pace to have the oldest and smallest Air Force and Navy in a generation. We are on pace to reduce 40,000 soldiers out of our Army. At a time when the world is growing more dangerous, we are growing weaker. This needs to change. If I'm elected President of the United States, we will rebuild the American military. We tell our men and women in uniform, and if you have served us in uniform, thank you for your service, and we thank you for being here today. We make a promise to our men and women in uniform. We tell them we are never going to put you in a fair fight. You're going to have better equipment, you're going to have better training, and you're going to have more information than any adversary you ever face. We won't be able to keep that promise if we keep these defense cuts. And we make another promise, and that is after you've taken care of us, when you come back home, we're going to take care of you. They're not keeping that promise either. Today you have a VA system that is failing our veterans. And I want to say this, there are good people at the VA. If you've interacted with the VA, you know that there are people there that are good people. They care about veterans. Many of them are veterans themselves. And then you've got some people that just aren't doing a good job. When I'm President of the United States, those people will be fired. And the VA benefits are going to follow the veteran, not the veteran have to follow those benefits. Which means if the local VA can't see you for 6 months, but the hospital around the corner can see you next week, you will be able to take your VA benefits and go to that hospital. And the one more thing we need to keep us safe is a foreign policy of moral clarity. What does that mean? It means this: our allies can trust us, they do trust us, and our adversaries respect us and don't try to test us. Now this is common sense. In fact, presidents across both parties have believed this, until now. Now we have a president that has the direct opposite. Now we have a president that has left our allies feeling betrayed and our adversaries feeling emboldened. And there is no better example of this than what's happening in the Middle East. In the entire Middle East, there is only one pro-American free enterprise democracy. In the whole Middle East, there's only one pro-American free enterprise democracy, the State of Israel. We have a president that treats the Prime Minister of Israel with less respect than what he gives the Ayatollah of Iran. And that's why on my first day in office, I will cancel this reckless deal with Iran. So these are our challenges, and these challenges are real. But we've always faced challenges. There's a tendency sometimes to think that we have it worse than anyone ever had it. Well, if you examine American history, you quickly realize this is a nation that has always faced great challenges. This nation was founded in an incredible challenge. This nation was founded by declaring independence from the most powerful empire on the planet. And then this nation had a great civil war that almost ended the young nation. Then it had a First World War. The world had never seen such carnage. Then it had a Great Depression. Then it had a Second World War. And then it had a long and dangerous Cold War. The 1960s were a testing time. Between Vietnam and the Civil Rights Movement, deeply divided this country. Time and again, this nation has faced great challenges. Ours is not the story of a nation or of a people that had it easy. Ours is the story of a nation and a people who in each generation have done what needed to be done to ensure that the next generation was better off than themselves. For 200 years, each generation of Americans did what they needed to do to ensure that the next generation was better off than themselves. And now our moment has arrived. Now the time has come for this generation to do its part. We are all called to this task, for we are all the beneficiaries of the extraordinary story of America. I always tell people that America doesn't owe me anything. America doesn't owe me a thing. But I have a debt to this country I'll never fully repay. You see, this is not just the country I was born in. This is the nation that literally changed the very history of my family. I'm joined here today actually by my sisters, so they know the story. They can confirm what I'm about to tell you. My parents, as I said, were not rich or famous people. My father had it particularly difficult. When he was 4 days shy of his 9th birthday, his mother dies. And so he has to stop going to school, and he has to start working at 9 years of age. He really never went back to school, and he would work for the next 70 years of his life. Now, like all young people, when he was a young boy, a young man, he had dreams, because young people have dreams. But his dreams for himself became impossible. And so when my parents came to America, they found a new dream. And their new dream became this: that everything that wasn't possible for them would be possible for us, that all the doors that had closed for them would be open for us, that all things they wanted for themselves, they would now be able to provide for their children. In America, my parents worked all kinds of jobs. My mother built aluminum chairs at a factory. She was a cashier at a hotel on Miami Beach. She was a maid at a hotel in Las Vegas, a stock clerk at Kmart. My father was primarily a banquet bartender, which meant he worked in rooms not unlike this one, behind a small portable bar on nights and on weekends and on holidays, and on days I'm sure he didn't feel like working, and well into his 70s. He stood behind that small portable bar in the back of the room all those years. So one day I would have the chance to stand in front of a room like this, or to do anything else I wanted. For me, the journey from behind that bar to the life I live today, for me, that is the essence of the American dream. It is what makes us special as a nation. For every country in the world has rich people. But what makes us so special is that here there are millions of people that will never be rich, but through hard work and perseverance achieve happiness and leave their children better off than themselves. And as Americans, we understand this because that's not just my story. Here in America, that is our story. For who among us is not but a generation or two removed from a story just like that? From grandparents who sacrificed and gave up everything so your parents could have a better life. From the parents who worked 2 jobs so you could have all the chances they never did. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you're the one working those 2 jobs and making those sacrifices so your children won't have to go through what you did. As a nation, this is our story. And whether or not we remain a special country will be determined by whether or not that journey that your parents made and mine is still possible. Whether or not we remain a special country will be determined by whether parents today can still do for their children what my parents did for me and what your parents did for you. This is the great cause of this moment. This is what this generation is called, not just to preserve, but to expand. And in this election, we have a chance to do it. In this election, we have a chance not just to save the American dream, but to expand it to reach more people and change more lives than ever before. In this election, we have a chance not just to recapture the promise of America, but to usher in the greatest era in our history. And if we do what needs to be done in this election, across this country, and yes, in this state, in both the primary and the general, if we do what needs to be done, then history will say of this generation that we were the authors of the new American century, of a 21st century that wasn't just as good as the 20th century, that it was better, the greatest era in the history of this nation. So I thank you for coming out tonight. God bless you. Thank you.